Hello, and welcome to another episode of History of Westeros podcast, a podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book series, as well as HBO's Game of Thrones. This is our Game of Thrones series in which we mostly talk about the TV show, specifically Season 4, Episode 5, First of His Name.
The first of his name, Tommen, what a name it is. Welcome back, everybody. We have ourselves on the Iron Couch, which I've dubbed it again because of all our lovely Game of Thrones maps behind it and because we've had so many great discussions here. Of course, I have Sean on my right, Sean of House Beard, and Ashaya on my left, as you all are very used to.
I don't have a house.
You don't have a house.
I am a bastard.
So, let's get started with some news first. First off, I'll be appearing on Zap2It's Google Hangout show, which is a discussion of the same episode. Mm-hmm. And this may have already, it's probably already out by the time you guys see this. Mm-hmm. That show's probably already been posted. Keep an eye out for that. I was also on last week's episode. We had a lot of fun talking about the show and what is coming up and a lot of other things. Another piece of important news, we have been participating, Ashaya and I, in a project with some Tower of the Hand guys and some other noted A Song of Ice and Fire luminaries like Sean T. Collins and Stefan Sasa and Amin Javadi and Stephen Atwell and some other names that I forget. Too many to list. A great list of people. And we are part of this book that's coming out September 29th called A Hymn for Spring. And we have submitted an essay on Harrenhal. Of course, we've got our historical flavor in there with a lot of parallels to the modern series and what's happening in the story. So check that out when it comes out. There's already a sample of it published in Stephen Atwell's Race for the Iron Throne book, which is been released recently. So check that out as well. Mm-hmm. Stephen is a great analyzer of politics, especially making comparisons to modern politics and modern monarchies and systems compared to Westeros. So check that out when you get a chance. Put in your pre-order if you need to. And let's get started with this episode. Starts off with Tommen's coronation. Right away, I think one of the first things that we notice there is that Margaery and Tommen are getting along nicely. Tommen shoots her a few looks, and he's clearly very happy. He's smiling at her, and she smiles back. And then something happens. Somebody blocks the camera. Yeah, so, Shaya, tell us about Cersei's moment there.
It was funny.
Yeah, I laughed.
Yeah, I know. It was actually really funny. I loved it when they showed it in the preview last week, and didn't disappoint.
Yeah, but Sean, the angry look she gave Margaery didn't really reflect how their conversation went, at least not on the surface.
No, I tell you, and I've thought this before, and it happens a couple times in this episode, I never know what I can trust from Cersei. Even when she seems to be like bearing her soul, I feel like she's just saying what this person needs to hear. Maybe she really feels that way, but I never really know.
Makes it hard to tell when she's being genuine because she's good at concealing.
Exactly.
Yeah, her genuine and her fake can often be the same, at least the way they appear.
On one hand, it made sense. The conversation they go on to have. At first, I'm like, Cersei's being particularly nice to Margaery, but then I think, what's she supposed to do? She sees the writing on the wall. She knows what's happening. You know, Tywin's going to set this marriage up. She sees them exchanging glances already. She might as well get involved and steer where she wants it to go. She might as well have Margaery on her side. But I still, in the back of my mind, I'm like, she set Margaery up. She's going to, I don't know what she's going to do. She's going to still try to turn Tommen against him. Or maybe it's as simple as she's trying to get pressure off her to marry Loras. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Maybe if this wedding happens, Tywin won't care as much, you know.
You wonder if she's maybe trying to get Margaery to let her guard down a little so she can maybe take advantage. Or maybe she genuinely thinks that a little bit of, at least some modest alliance is appropriate. Certainly from later scenes in the episode, the way Cersei discusses things with Tywin, you get the impression that she's at least putting a face forward that is for the Lannister cause and less about herself. But as you say, not entirely sure we can trust that. Now, Margaery is clearly aware, or at least is playing this sort of dialogue game with Cersei, and she takes a few shots of her own.
Yeah.
You noticed one in particular
there.
Yeah,
when she says, I hardly know what to call you, sister or mother. And if you remember last season, when Cersei and Margaery are talking, and I think they're talking about the reigns of Castamere, and Marjorie calls her sister, and Cersei says, if you ever call me sister again, I'll have you strangled in your sleep. So Marjorie saying this was really interesting to me. Like, is she trying to incent Cersei? Is Marjorie realizing that she has the upper hand a little bit, that Cersei needs her? I'm not sure.
And it's funny because she doesn't technically call her sister. She says, I don't know whether to call you sister or mother. And really important, if you guys noticed this the first time around, or if you watch the episode again, take a look at the camera, the way the camera is positioned in that scene. Marjorie says that line to Cersei about sister or mother, and she's really looking at Cersei to see her reaction. She's got that sly glance, like, what's she going to do here? How's she going to react to me saying this? So they're both kind of taking stock of each other and catching each other's reactions, I think.
Cersei gives nothing away.
Right, you're right.
Straight ahead, smile on her face, no reaction.
You're right, yes. Cold and confident and revealing nothing. So makes it even harder to figure out what Cersei's really got going on in her mind there. So let's move forward to Daenerys and her small council. This scene has a lot of interesting undertones and a throwaway detail that actually might be really important. As with most of the previous discussion episodes we've had for the season, we're going to have some time after the episode to discuss some spoilery topics. That'll be after the credits, as we have another one, as we have with past episodes as well. So one of those things happens here in this episode, and we won't talk about it now. So just take note. Something to do with... Sorry, Sean, you can't know yet. Not your time. So something that Dario says, something that we need to talk about later. So we'll get to that at the end of the episode. So never fear, we're not skipping over that. We're just pausing it for later. Mm-hmm. So Sean, you had a lot of interesting thoughts on Daenerys as a ruler, and
you had a reaction to what you thought was going to happen. You paused it and everything.
Yeah, I was afraid, and I don't know if I was afraid for disappointment from the writing or from the character Daenerys. I'm not sure, but what I felt was coming was she was going to clear the room. Because basically she's like, gearing up to go back home and seize her throne, Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, yeah, we got the people. Hey, I got you the ships, And Jorah's like, actually, I don't know about this. I don't think, you got enough men to maybe take it, but can we hold it? We got all of Westeros, da-da-da. She's like, everyone leave. Not you, Jorah. And I'm like, is she about to chastise him for going against the grain? I feel like they're in a council meeting trying to give her advice. She can't get mad at him for, not liking everyone's plan or her plan or whatever.
Yeah, you really don't want her to become one of those just rulers who wants to hear what they want to hear. Or people say what they want to hear. Yeah. So
sure enough, as the scene goes, she's like taking heed of what he has to say and taking it to heart and realizing, yeah, you're right. I can't even control this one city. How am I going to control 7 kingdoms?
Yes.
You're worried that our army might be enough to take King's Landing, but not all of Westeros. She's worried that her wisdom or experience might not even be enough to rule King's Landing, much less all of Westeros. So I thought it was a good moment. I appreciated it.
Yeah, and it's also good to see that she's gaining wisdom as she goes. She's clearly made some mistakes. Clearly the way she handled Astapor and Yunkai didn't work. As we see Cleon, the Butcher King, takes over in Astapor, and in Yunkai, a different group take over. I don't remember what was mentioned there. But in any case, the policies and structure she left behind fell apart almost immediately, and that's got to be disappointing to her. But she also handles it realistically and says, look, she's not acting like a child who's not getting her way. She's saying, well, if this didn't work, I got to figure out what is going to work, and I got to do it right. This is, in a sense, her training for potentially ruling Westeros later.
Mm-hmm. I remember Tywin even a couple episodes ago when he was talking to Tommen about Robert Baratheon, said there's a difference between conquering and ruling,
Yes.
And I think we see Dany realizing that.
And she's clearly got the skill to do the conquering, and her most valuable tools potentially for conquering the dragons haven't even been used yet. Yeah. So not at least to any great degree as far as conquering. They certainly did their bit with the slavers at Astapor. But anyway, so you had another comment about this scene?
Yeah, another good thing to see Daenerys gaining is new clothing. Is that she's wearing a new dress. It's not blue. Thank you. But one interesting thing is that she has that collar around her neck, and it's kind of like she's, taking fashion tips from her freed slaves, like their collars they had. And Missandei carries the blue torch on, though.
That's right. Missandei's got the blue going. So, have we had anything else for the scene? Shall we move on?
Don't think so.
Okay, once again, there'll be more on the scene in the spoilery section of this episode. So now we go on to the Vale, where we have Sansa and Littlefinger at the Bloody Gate, which immediately indicates a difference between the show and the book, which this is not a complaint. It's merely pointing out a change, because some of these changes, if they're not pointed out, can really confuse people who have read the books and watched the show, because some of these details are too minor to necessarily be really ingrained in your head. So when something is changed, it's a little subtle, you might not notice it. So that's part of what we're doing, is we want to make sure those things get pointed out. One of those things here is a major geographical change. The Bloody Gate in the books is the entrance to the Vale in general. It's the pass through the mountains. In other words, it's not the entrance to the Eyrie itself. So that's a change. In the show, the Eyrie is only approachable via the Bloody Gate. In the books, it's the entire Vale that you have to go, that you can approach through the Bloody Gate, but not if you're coming from the sea. The ocean is wide open to approach by ship. In fact, the Andals, the original, who most of the people in Westeros descend from the Andals, invaded Westeros for the first time many thousands of years ago. They landed in the Vale, and of course they made their way through there without having to deal with a lot of these mountains, because the eastern side, the eastern seaboard, doesn't have this imposing mountain pass. Anyway, that's not an important change, but it is worth pointing out, because you might be confused as to the geography if it's not, if this small difference isn't explained. Anyway, so we have Sansa and Littlefinger approaching the Bloody Gate, and they certainly show the soldiers around the canyon. They show how well protected it is and how difficult it would be to assault. Littlefinger goes into his little speech about how impregnable the Eyrie is, which we kind of already knew, but this just takes it to another level, showing just how impossible it would be for an army to approach this way and do any sort of damage.
One little thing I wanted to point out when you're talking about the geography and how ever minor a detail that might be, I every now and then go to one of these maps when they're talking about what's going on. I was thinking about Theon's sister, who I think they changed her name, right? Is it?
Yeah, it's Yara instead of Asha. That's right. Yeah.
Yara in the show, Asha in the book.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so Asha is like, I'm going to get Theon. I'm taking a ship and a crew, and I'm gonna go get Theon. And she takes off against Baelon's will. And in my mind, though, I'm thinking, I have this vague image of the map in my head. Where's she sailing to? You can't sail to Winterfell, or I guess maybe the Dreadfort, or like, and I'm like looking over at the map, trying to see on there, where is she sailing all the way around the continent back to, even then she still would have to land.
It's
her
a
ship
little
and go
strange, yeah.
But I noticed, looking at the map, that there's a river that cuts in pretty deep through the north into an area called Moat Cailin, which is where Roose said that he had to get through to get back home, and sent Ramsay down there. And so I started to piece together, that's probably where she's going. She's going to sail up that river to Moat Cailin, where the other Greyjoy troops are at, and there's probably going to be a confrontation or whatever,
sense.
know. But anyway, the point is that those little bits of geography sometimes, I don't know, people reading the books or watching the show, if they've absorbed as much as I have poring over these maps, but it actually can adjust how you perceive what's going on.
I haven't checked the difference between, now there is some difference between the canon Game of Thrones maps and the canon A Song of Ice and Fire maps. And this isn't a difference I looked for. It's possible that they didn't account for this show change of where the Bloody Gate is. But we don't need to talk about that too much. It's not particularly important. Some more thoughts on the scene, though, however.
One thing was they're walking up. They're already, like, archers can see them, and he's like, pull up your hood. Which is laughable to me, and so careless of Peter, and just foolish of him. But to elaborate more on that, in the books, Sansa, she says, I'm Elaine, as you heard, and he says that she is his niece. In the books, she is his bastard daughter. That's who she's playing the part of, Elaine Stone. And they dye her hair brown because red hair is pretty distinct, and they're going to the Vale. My main question from this, and the main reason I wasn't a huge fan of this change, it felt like kind of a pointless change. With the bastard daughter part, not so much the brown hair part. That was minor, though. Certainly would have been easy to put her in a wig. But my main question is, does Peter Baelish have a sibling in the show? Because he doesn't have one in the book. So either Peter has a sibling in the show, whether dead or alive, or he's being careless enough to just think that people will just not look into him having a sibling. Either way, it's a little odd.
Would it be? Do you think it'd be careless though if he just claims to have a dead sibling?
People could still look. It's still, there's still more questions to be raised. With I never knew the Baelish has had 2 kids.
Especially as he's angling for more power, it's going to be more relevant who else is in his family.
Well, here's the other thing. He's going to reveal who she is eventually. So it doesn't matter if someone looks into it if they don't look into it like immediately.
Yeah, I still think it's
which
just
would be
slightly
really
more
hard to do.
I just think it's slightly more careless.
There might be
risky
ways that this ends up being okay, but it does seem like he's much more of a careful planner, and so.
Well, which is why I think we might should give him the benefit of the doubt. Like he's thought this. There's probably maybe an angle.
Well, I was curious if maybe he just has. Maybe he just has.
He may actually have a brother.
That simple.
You're right.
Or a sister, or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally possible.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, and I'll see how they play it out, but honestly, I was also just disappointed. Maybe Elaine is still a bastard daughter of someone, and, is still a bastard, and she's still lowly, but it's kind of a nice symbolic thing that Sansa is a bastard now, and she was the least close to Jon Snow because he was a bastard, and so to see her kind of beginning to relate to him a little more was a really nice thing. So we'll see. As long as she still is kind of more lowly in the castle pecking order, I'll be fine with it.
Was that something in the books that the Sansa's considering herself like a bastard relating to Jon? Was that something that happened in the book? That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, now there's something I didn't know about.
She could still be a bastard.
I feel like it's a little something we're missing out on there. Yeah.
But I'll see. We'll see how they play it, and I am tentatively disliking it, but hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to Lysa and Sweet Robin appearing, and we have a really great job of acting by the little kid there. As much as that kid is, you hate the character or you gotta love the actor. Yeah. And it's good to see that he didn't get a lot bigger in between the intervening seasons. Like Bran is starting to get a bit really tall.
Very tall.
It's a bit of a problem.
He's a full-grown teen now.
But this little kid actor does a great job of just being a little bit awkward and being just a little bit off, which is perfect. And Lysa too, she just looks crazy. She just looks neurotic and looks like she's just tightly wound and just kind of ready to go off, which she does. So, and she goes off in a more positive way, in kind of a "we're getting married now," that kind of, hiding the septon behind the door, saying we're getting married right away.
I think Lysa's middle name is Exposition.
And a scene or two later, it's Sexposition when she's screaming. She must have. I saw someone comment. I wish I could give credit to whoever said this. I saw this online somewhere. Someone pointed out that Littlefinger must have read Podrick Payne's book on pleasing women before this scene, because she was loud. I mean, Sansa's in a different room.
I think it should have cut to Daenerys in the next scene, and she's like trying to sleep, and she's like, "What's that scream?"
maybe Podrick read Littlefinger's book.
Hey, there you go. Littlefinger is the one who owns the brothels, but unless he did say in season 1 that he doesn't sleep with other women, which Lysa doesn't believe, apparently, given what comes up later. She thinks he's having sex with all these prostitutes, apparently. Yeah.
And Sansa.
And Sansa, right. So here comes a pretty amazing reveal, which is once Lysa and Peter are alone, after Sansa's been sent off to her room, she starts blabbing on about how she was the one to poison her own husband and how Littlefinger encouraged her to send this letter to Catelyn. That's a humongous reveal. Of course, book readers knew that was coming.
In the past and all these things there as well.
So it really goes to show that, wow, Littlefinger started the ball rolling on a lot of this. And now, Sean, when we talked about this last night, this would be a good little conversation that we had offline to recap in this episode here. You were not quite sure why Littlefinger wanted to make that play.
Yeah, I remember thinking that it, it must have not been said at any point, but I even want to go back and watch. I think the very first scene of the very first episode was Jon Arryn's dead body.
Yeah.
And Jaime and Cersei talking. And I just have this memory, it's probably just a false memory, but of them talking about having poisoned Jon Arryn. And I guess that wasn't quite what the conversation was. Maybe it was more about concern about them. Maybe they thought that he was onto them, and I assumed that they killed him because of that.
That was the assumption. That's what they led us to believe. They were concerned about his looking on to their bastards.
But just because they're worried about that doesn't mean they killed him. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't have killed him, but someone else just did it first, I guess, But it just, in the same way that it made so much sense to me that they killed him, it must have made a lot of sense to Caitlin too. And
Ned as well, yes.
Yeah, and then as Ned starts to piece it together, and so, this is a really long-term, intricate plot that Littlefinger's got going on.
Yeah, you should have seen your face when she revealed this, Sean. I'd already seen it, and so I turned around and was staring at Sean. And I was like, "This is gonna be a good reaction." He was like. He was so shocked.
So that really brings Littlefinger more to the center as one of the major plotters and one of the major movers of the action, and it moves him to the center where he already was in the center. It just reveals that he's been there the whole time. And we already knew he was a major player, but we didn't necessarily know that he's been involved for this long, and his motivation isn't entirely clear. That's another thing, Sean, that you were not so sure about. And what I pointed out was Littlefinger, as he went on an exposition, I believe it was season 2, talking about how chaos is a ladder and how he thrives on chaos. Chaos is a particularly good environment for him as a manipulator, as a man who seeks power. He's good at chaotic situations and exploiting them. And he saw this as a perfect opportunity to get the Starks and the Lannisters at each other's throats, and potentially the Vale and some of these other kingdoms could be involved with this fallout as well. Of course, he didn't want the Vale getting militarily involved. He's done a great job of that. The Vale's strength is entirely unspent. The War of the Five Kings depleted several of the kingdom's military strength and resources. The Vale is almost entirely untouched by the war. Thus, Littlefinger is getting himself in control of a very defensible region that is also at full strength militarily. So that has to matter later, right? So definitely a situation to keep an eye on. Very important, this development with Littlefinger, and we're all eager to see how it continues.
Not to take anything away from Littlefinger, but I would point out that certain things were probably going to play out similarly even without his interference.
But the main thing that may not have played out that way was anyone figuring out that Joffrey was, a child of incest. That was the thing. That was the secret that was threatening to fade into the darkness with Jon Arryn's death. So I think Littlefinger wanted to get that whole process restarted.
Possibly, but that's one of the points I was going to make. I think Ned was still going to start piecing that together. I think Joffrey was still going to stir up trouble with people. Arya and Joffrey were going to butt heads. Cersei was going to make some demand that was unreasonable, that was going to pit Ned against Robert, or etc. You know what I mean? The personalities involved there were going to end up in conflict anyway.
But not potentially over Jon Arryn's murder, right?
And not for many years, potentially. It could have been years later.
Again, certainly Littlefinger is going to steer this in a way, and when he knows how things are going down, it gets to maneuver, and it's happening like chaos to everyone else when he's plotting it. But I still think some of the chaos that has ensued, some of the strife between the Lannisters and the Starks and so on, was somewhat destined to happen anyway, just given the nature of Ned's character,
I think
and
that's
Joffrey's
true.
character, and so on.
Ned being a really inflexible ruler, and Robert being an unimaginative, not caring king. Good. Yeah. Yes, good term.
With all these
Drunk.
People conniving for power, and all these people with their own arrogance, Tywin and Cersei, and
as we saw, Renly was already plotting to get Marjorie in Cersei's place for the to ditch the Lannisters for the Tyrells. That was already that had nothing to do with Littlefinger, at least not that we know of. He was probably involved, but not in a this is a new idea, do this kind of way. He probably. As a member of the small council, of course, he was involved in some way. So, okay, so let's move on. we have, I believe, Tywin and Cersei is the next scene. And this is a bit of a departure from what a lot of us book readers are used to. And again, I'm not complaining. It's been consistent that Lena Headey's Cersei has been a bit more muted. I don't mean that in a bad way. She's not as rage-filled as she is in the book.
He means
She's not
it in
as
a good
paranoid.
way, to be clear.
Well, yeah. I don't mean that they've diluted her character. I just mean that she's different. She's more of the... She's a little bit more likable. She has a little bit more human emotion that we can sympathize with. But she's also a bit more calculating and a bit more in control of her outward feelings. In the book, she's wears her emotions on her sleeves a lot. She has outbursts, and she's also younger, which is an important thing. That's a part of, would make sense, part of her wisdom. And the show version of her is considerably older. So it makes sense that she would have a little more experience, a little more maturity, and be able to control her outbursts a little more. Ashaya, what were your thoughts on this scene?
Well, for one, I guess a fortnight is a reasonable amount of time.
That comes up a couple times.
Yeah, it comes up a couple times.
For Tywin's his aggressive scheduling, anyway.
Yeah, that's enough time to mourn your husband, your son, whatever. I thought it was really nice to see a positive Tywin-Cersei interaction, and to see Tywin trusting in her more and having just a good meeting with her. It was just nice to see him. He gave Cersei this look at the end after she kind of stated her case for why Tyrion should go down, And as she leaves, he gives her this look where he's like, maybe I didn't, I should have given you more trust over the years. Maybe, you're my true child. He just looked like he was really considering her and thinking you're what I have left, and it was really good. Yeah.
I really like the scene. I like Tywin's more reasonable attitude that he seems to have in the show. He's more reasonable and less imperious. In the books, he's extremely proper and proud, and you wouldn't see him do these little things that he does in the show, like pouring someone's wine. Like he poured Cersei a cup of wine. He would not do that in the books. I don't think he would carve up his own stag either.
Oh yeah, or the fishing scene.
Or the fishing. Those are things that book Tywin would not do. He's just so proper, and he wouldn't be seen doing these menial tasks. He would have a servant do all these things. He would sit in his chair and be ultra dignified and just be in control and not let with his big side whiskers. In the books he's got huge sideburns and a shaved head. And his eyes are particularly piercing, which is Cersei in particular notes how his eyes are incredible and how they can see the weakness in your soul and how they're just piercing and penetrating, and how few people can meet his gaze, which I think Charles Dance does a pretty good job. His gaze is pretty intimidating, so I think that's well represented here. But also, go ahead.
In a way, I don't know how to compare it to the books per se, but I feel like in the show, these things that might be seen as menial tasks that a character or a version of Tywin's character might be above or whatever, I think in the show are done in such a way that they are putting him in control. I still think that it's on some level showing that even like carving the stag, showing he's skilled on multiple levels.
Well, he does dominate that conversation.
He's not this, I can't think of the word, this elitist in an ivory tower. Like he can do what I can do what you do and better. You know what I mean? He's a little bit more of that, I think.
Also, of course, there's the undertones of both those scenes are potentially related to the houses that represented. Carving up a stag is
the symbolism that you get there.
Serving up the fish.
Yes, Tully. So that is all. I think that's the main subtle.
Which I love that they do that type of thing.
Right.
We also had, of course, in the books we have Roose Bolton killing some wolves.
Yes, that's very important. And that comes right before the betrayal.
So that's kind of the Tywin scenes are kind of like those Roose scenes.
That's a good point. I hadn't made that connection. I certainly noticed those differences, but didn't connect the show book versions of that the different ways. Now,
Tywin also took over for Roose Bolton himself, from if you recall, in the Arya scene.
That's right.
So
that's right.
That's interesting.
Those are Roose and Arya scenes in the books.
So excuse me for a second.
Okay, we also have a important change that is to do with the Lannister gold mines running dry, which is a interesting and I think good change from the books. Now, some people might say the books don't make it clear one way or the other whether the Lannister mines have run out. And that's pretty much true, though I would say there's some pretty solid evidence that they haven't run dry in the books. At one point during the War of Five Kings, Catelyn receives word that Robb and his men have captured two different gold mines in the west. Remember that at one point during the war, Robb is trying to lure Tywin to the west so he can run them around in a chase and let both of them live off of Lannister land rather than the Riverlands. They're taking their food and their shelter in the west, so it'll burn up the west supplies and burn up their time and keep Tywin's army off of balance. So I'm starting to go on a tangent about that war, but the gold mines were captured, and it's a point is made that no better way to get the Lannisters to come running than to threaten their gold. So it's possible that the Starks didn't know that those mines were empty, but there's no indication that those mines were empty. Every indication is that those mines were valuable strategic targets. So this is very interesting, and I like it because, frankly, 8,000, 4,000, however long the history of Westeros truly is, that's a long time to be getting gold out of mines. These things have to run out eventually. So I think that's a nice, realistic change. And also
What perfect timing, too.
Yeah. It also just creates new conflict. The Lannisters are not just this endless source of wealth. They have their own financial issues, and they have to deal with them. And this is part of why their alliance with the Tyrells is so important, because the Tyrells have a lot of wealth, too. And this Iron Bank situation, which is the final discussion point of this. Well, I guess there's also the marriages. The final discussion point of the scene, I don't remember which order it happens in. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the Iron Bank is a major discussion point of this scene. And I think they really want to drive home the point that this wealth thing is going to matter. And this Iron Bank situation is really important. They want to make sure all the viewers understand what we've been trying to explain the last few episodes of our podcast here, which is that the Iron Bank is going to continue to become more important, and how important they are. We've talked about their history and all that. So it'll be very curious to see how this is going to go. And from the preview for the next episode, it looks like we'll see some Stannis. It looks like we'll see some of this Iron Bank stuff come to a head, or at least we'll see the plot line advance in that direction. And I'm very curious to see what they do. As some of you know, some of this stuff is in a different time period in the book, so it's interesting to see how the show is going to change some of these things. I'm looking forward to those changes because, as usual, I like to see new things and I like to be surprised. So, did you guys have anything else on that scene? Of course, the discussion of marriage is important. When the marriage of Cersei to Loras, that gets brought up, and Cersei starts to talk about how she's all in it for the family. She seems to have had a bit of a reversal in her attitude.
1 month, so she's supposed to marry him.
That's right. That's not very long.
We'll see.
And Tywin, isn't completely fooled by her. It's all about the family spiel, because he suspects that, correctly, that part of her angle, speaking the way she does, is to get Tywin to see her side of things with regards to Tyrion's guilt, which she is completely convinced of. And from previews, it seems that Tywin is somewhat convinced as well. But, you can never be too sure when they take just a 2-second clip. The way they edit it, you never know what the line before that was. So we can't be too sure about that. Sean, did you have any thoughts on that? I like your reaction there. You're skeptical that Cersei and Loras are going to get married.
Yeah, I mean, she's just said it multiple times. She's, there's a scene where Tywin told Tyrion, "You got to marry Sansa," and he's like, put an objective, like, okay, I guess I don't have a choice. And Cersei's kind of giggling. He's like, "Hey, you too, you're marrying Loras." And she's like, "I am not." And he's like, "Yes, you are." But then I wish I could remember the other scenes, but I feel like at least 2 times it's come up and she has said, "No, I'm not," or "We'll see," or something along that line. And then, when Marjorie was bringing it up earlier in this episode, she's like, "I don't know whether they call you mother or sister." Cersei just gave no response, just gave nothing. And in my mind, she's okay. Go ahead, call me sister for now, but it's gonna be mother. I feel like she's got something. She's scheming. She's angling.
She's got more authority than that. Yeah.
It does bother me. I feel like Cersei is. I feel like this episode was. I tell you the way I take my notes, right? I write all the characters' names down, and as scenes happen, I like connect dots between characters. And one thing that does is it kind of makes me feel like you can kind of visually see whose episode this is. Now, it's never one person's episode because they're jumping around between Danny and John and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
But this was a Cersei episode. I just have all these lines going from Cersei to other people, you know.
She's the most prominent character other than the northern stuff that happens up in the north, I would say.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah.
And I think sometimes...
I guess she has the most interactions with different people, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the most screen time, but maybe the most screen time.
Because certainly Sansa, we have the Sansa and the Vale stuff, and that's like a big scene in the northern stuff. But Cersei interacts with, you know, Oberyn and Tywin and Marjorie, and she's at the coronation. And anyway.
I feel like a lot of times scenes with Tywin are Tywin scenes. And
that's partly because Charles Dance is
right, his
dominates.
character and his performance of the actor are pretty dominant. But I felt like that scene was a Cersei scene. So I feel like this is the episode where Cersei's playing her game. She goes to see Tywin, she goes to see Oberyn, she's getting her ducks in a row, you know.
Yeah.
Surprised we haven't seen her see Mace. She's going to all the judges.
Mace has really not done a lot so far.
Yeah,
I was expecting a bigger role
she's
for
going
him.
to each of the judges. You'd think we'd also see her like just stop by Mace and she like talks to him for a second. And he's like, that was easy. I didn't really have to say anything at all. He's like, of course he's guilty, you know, whatever. But and
he would to his like, my daughter was up there. Yeah, of course. Yeah, he
it would have been like a really easy short scene. She would have like, you know,
which sort of, by the way, would speak a bit more to the fact that he probably wasn't in on the poisoning plot either.
I feel like, you know, Cersei's, you know, she's just hell-bent on revenge. She's convinced as Tyrion. Tyrion did tell her that one day, your guard's down, I'm going to ruin your world. You know, she has every reason to think it was Tyrion. But never mind politically, she's probably better off without Tyrion, too. Another person to vie for power and to interfere with her, and someone who's capable and so on, you know. But whatever Tyrion or whoever poisoned the king deserves, I assume they even deserve anything because it was Joffrey, you know, but by law or by honor of the Lannisters or whatever else, you know, it makes sense that it should be a terrible punishment. But just because the punishment should be terrible doesn't mean Tyrion did it, you know, and Cersei's acting on that. It makes sense for her too, but I wasn't assuming that Tywin or Oberyn would. And it, especially from the previews for the next episode, it seemed they certainly made it seem that way, and so I'm concerned for Tyrion.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the next scene?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got Arya and Sandor, who once again seem to deserve their own spin-off. They have great dialogue, and the focus of this scene is Arya's death prayer. Which is a very long list of names she wants to kill, and of course she ends it with the Hound, which he hears and is, you know, he has his reaction. What did you guys think of this scene? Sean, we'll go with you first.
I liked it. I mean, I sort of liked it. I think it did a good job of doing something that I'm sad to see happen. It makes sense. I like that. I feel things are progressing as they should, but I don't like that this is the way things are.
Okay.
Arya's turning dark.
And she is.
Her list of people, at first, she just saw her dad get decapitated, and so she's boom, 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 thinks that these people are responsible for it and wants revenge on these people, and she had like 3 or 5 names or something, and they were all pretty directly, you know, Joffrey, you know, the king that ordered it, the man that held the axe that did it, you know, like, but now she's got like 14 people, just anyone who looked at her crossways, you know, like, it's like
she got Beric Dondarrion and Thoros and Mir.
Yeah, that was a surprise. She didn't have them on the list in the books.
Well, they let Gendry be taken.
Yep.
And they let Gendry being taken, which wasn't in the books. Added like Melisandre's on the list now, and and
they didn't judge the Hound guilty either.
Yeah.
Which she was upset about that even though they went by trial by combat and he won, she was still just thought it was unjust.
Yeah. But even though it makes sense for her to think it's unjust.
She knows that he did kill.
The people she's naming have done things that possibly deserve punishment. But someone doing something that possibly deserves punishment is different from a little girl wanting to kill them. You know what I mean? Like, a little girl wanting to kill the man that killed her father, I could see that. But I can even see this little girl wanting to kill all these people, but it's sad to see this. It's dark to see this. You can see the road that she's on. It's not like when she kills one of these bad guys, she's like, there, now I've got vengeance and I'll be a happy girl now. No, she's just on this dark path. It's not, I don't think it's going to change.
And I think one thing that, some of this is from this scene and some of it's from perhaps more from the next Arya Sandor scene. And I'm starting to get the impression a little bit that Sandor, he sort of cares for her a little bit. He sort of sees himself as a bit of a mentor. He teaches her things. A lot of the things he says to her have the candor of harsh lessons, like he's trying to educate her. It's also kind of clear that he has more respect for her than she has for him. He kind of likes her in a sense because she's tough, and even though he laughs at her, he respects that she's got this tough attitude that she can't really necessarily back up with action because she is just still a little girl.
I think he knows her personality in a grown man's body would be a formidable warrior.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And so he's got some respect for her. Plus, he's got a little bit of heart. He's a bit of the beast in the Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, we saw him. He had a bit of a soft spot for Sansa Stark, and of course Arya is her sister. And of course we see in the next scene. I thought it was kind of interesting to have us go back and forth between Arya and Sandor and Lysa and Sansa. And then, of course, we have Podrick and Brienne, but then we go back to Arya and Sandor. And
just some quick changes.
It makes me think a little bit about, obviously you can't see an Arya scene followed by a Sansa thing without thinking of the two of them, being family. And, Sandor's tied up in that. And we hear about Sansa's mother, and it's just kind of, I like that they were placed together.
It's interesting, quick observation about the episode in general. There's a lot of just one-on-one scenes, just two characters having a dialogue, and not with Podrick and Brienne a couple times, Lysa and Peter, Lysa and Sansa, Peter and Sansa, Tywin and Cersei. Now, a lot of the episodes are like that, but this episode's particularly strong in that
And then,
regard.
of course, the ending, it ends with, just all-out.
Yeah, then
it ends and starts with an all-out, everyone all together,
Oh, yeah, you're right, the coronation.
The coronation and Dany's small council, those two. Those are the beginning, and then it ends with the big fights, the Night's Watch, Craster scene. But everything between that is pretty much just one-on-one, or, maybe, just a small group of 4 people at max.
Yeah.
But, anyways,
I will say, just based on the way of my notes, I can confirm that, or explain rather, that it's what's happening in this episode that's different, because there are one-on-ones in all the episodes.
Of course.
But usually they're one of a couple things. There are one-on-ones between different people in King's Landing, or maybe Jon or Dany. But this has been one-on-ones between characters that are in one-on-one situations.
Yes.
It's been. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That I think is the thing that's unique about this episode.
And we see them multiple times. We see Arya and Sandor twice. We see Lysa and Sansa, and we see Lysa and Peter. We see Podrick and Brienne twice.
It's also worth noting that these characters, I think, are all destined to join up.
Could be.
Brienne is looking for Sansa. Sansa's with Littlefinger. Sandor's taking her to the Vale, to her sister. You know what I mean? I'm assuming these characters are all going to come together, so it makes sense to start intertwining them now.
So we have the next scene, which is Lysa and Sansa again, and it starts off with a couple of kinds of sweetness, both in Lysa being sweet, but of course it's a facade, and actual sweet foods that are served to Sansa that she is eating with happiness before things get dark. And there's a bit of backstory there, some discussion of Lysa and Catelyn as younger people, and how Littlefinger, Peter, played a role in their childhood, and how clearly Lysa was in love with Peter, and Peter was in love with Catelyn, and Catelyn was in love with Brandon Stark, Ned's dead brother, who died, whose death was one of the key milestones leading up to the war of, to Robert's Rebellion. And that, of course, we also hear about how Littlefinger was savagely wounded by Brandon in a duel, and I believe that duel was explained earlier in a prior season. It was, right?
Yep,
okay.
yep.
Right.
So I don't need to go into that detail. Yeah. But of course the scene gets dark, and as she's basically just getting Sansa to talk, and as soon as Sansa starts to talk about how Peter is helping her and protecting her, Lysa jumps all over her with all these accusations and start crushing her hands and gets extremely neurotic and dangerous, and her crazy look turns into crazy reality. Shay, your thoughts on this scene?
A couple things. One, it's very convenient to have a character that's pretty much insane when it comes to exposition purposes, as I mentioned earlier. They'll just rant on about everything that, people need to be reminded of pretty easily, and not all too unnaturally, I'd say.
Second time this episode.
Yeah, second time this episode for her. As I said, Lysa exposition Aaron. So that there was that. Another thing I thought was funny is that she's talking about Sansa getting fat. I mean about Catelyn getting fat, and then she's trying to feed Sansa these sweet kicks, like saying she's gonna be nice. But I can't help but wonder if Lysa's also thinking, let's make you less desirable, Sansa. Let's fatten you up. Yeah, I just kind of thought about that.
That's clever.
And the other thing was that Sansa says those exact same words that she says as her defense to Lysa, where she says, "I'm a stupid little girl with stupid dreams who never learns." She says that exact same thing to the Tyrells, to Olenna and Marjorie, and so that was an example of her being, as Sandra called it, a little bird who just repeats, things.
That's a good call. And also, it shows that she's learning to say what needs to be said to diffuse the situation. She's learning that people need to hear what they need to hear. She's figuring out that tell people what they want to hear, and things will go better for you. And that is one of the core characteristics a person who intends to succeed in a court intrigue type of situation is going to need to learn that skill. And it's good to see Sansa learning it.
I would say she's already learned it. Sansa's one of my favorite characters. You got to understand, for Sansa to succeed before, success was living. Success was not being tortured or raped by Joffrey or whoever else. That was success. You know what I mean? Like, other people's success is like be the king or conquer a city or execute the king or something like that. She was just trying to survive. All the other characters, all the other Starks, many other characters in the show who are in dire straits of different sorts, they at least can pick up a sword and go do something about it. Arya, Jon, whoever else, right? But Sansa is a prisoner.
Not so much Bran.
Maybe not Bran. But at least Bran is like moving out.
He's moving. He's doing his thing.
He has allies. He has vision. He has, a course of action. But Sansa is just a prisoner to a bunch of psychos, a bunch of power-hungry psychos.
Thinks their whole family's dead.
Yeah,
and the people who are at all kind to her have an ulterior motive, which is that they all believe she's the heir to Winterfell. So that's why they care. They don't give a crap about her. They care about her claim.
And she realizes at the end of that scene, she's like, "Oh shit, I am not in that much of a better situation right now."
Right, which I thought was I felt that same way from almost the whole way. I think I might have even said at one point, she just went from the frying pan to the oven. I don't know how much safer she is with Littlefinger. Maybe more secure. Maybe less likely to randomly be killed by Joffrey or something. Yeah. But she's still, in my opinion, has not had the ability to, quote-unquote, stand up and fight like some of the other characters are sort of lucky to have been able to do. But she still has done what she is needed to do to, quote-unquote, succeed. And in fact, not just barely get by, because it was 2 seasons ago when she was talking back to Joffrey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The same sort of backhanded compliments that Tyrion will give Joffrey, the type of compliments that Tyrion can only be upset about by admitting that he didn't actually do something that he wants to be. Sansa was doing that to Joffrey too. I think she's a clever little girl and definitely does understand. Not that she's like a perfect expert with the wisdom of all these other characters. She's coming along, but I think she figured out pretty quickly in King's Landing when she had to. What to do, what to say, when to be quiet, Joffrey just had her putting dead family members in front of her face, and if she didn't say or do the right thing, he might kill her or torture her or make it worse, and so she had to suck up her emotion as she looked at her father's head on a spike and say what Joffrey wanted to hear, etc., etc. I think that she's...
You could say that she has the talent for it, and she's developing the skills as well.
Yeah, but I don't think she just now figured out how to deal with Lysa. Mm-hmm. She, you know what I mean?
She's putting what she learned to use in the scene with Lysa. She didn't expect to have to right away, and then she realized that Lysa's crazy, and was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to tell her what she wants to hear, and I'm gonna have to cry and get get her motherly instinct to kick in here and make her feel sorry for me rather than antagonistic towards her.
Plug in almost any other character into Sansa's situation. Arya would be dead already.
Arya would, she's not going to play along. Arya would just keep pushing against the grain, and she's too wild. Sansa is able to...
I think Arya might have gotten free. I think she might have escaped.
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
true.
Yes, she did. She did escape. But,
I
think she might have, as long as she just held on for a week, and she would have had a chance, and she would have just ran down in the gutters or done whatever she needed to do. I did actually think it was really interesting, and I thought of the same thing in season 3, when Sansa called herself a stupid little girl, and all that. That's Sansa, her defense and her way to, keep people off her back is exactly the thing that most people that hate Sansa say about her. That she's a stupid little girl, she doesn't learn, all these things, and her saying that is just very funny to me.
It's perfect for Game of Thrones too. It's Tyrion all over again saying I'm a dwarf. That's what I am. Telling Jon, you're a bastard. Own it. Be a bastard. Sansa's everybody thinks Sansa's stupid. Okay, I'll pretend to be stupid.
Little girl.
All right then. Yeah. I'll use that to my advantage. It's very fitting. It's pure Game of Thrones theme there, and also it fits. We brought up Sandor earlier with his views on Sansa in general, and it fits with what you're saying. She's trapped. She's a little bird in a cage. All she can do is repeat what she's been told, but it's no longer that simple. She is still a bird in a cage, but she's figured out a lot of things, and she knows how to talk to people, and she maybe is going to be able to make more use of that and turn her own power into a strength and her own character into a strength. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Now, moving forward, we have Podrick and Brienne, who are angling to be the next Arya and Sandor with their wandering the countryside, having great dialogue.
I hope we see an outbreak of art. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed, but after this season, there's been a huge amount, so many pieces. I can't count. I try to keep up with all the art of Ice and Fire, and so many pieces with Arya and Sandor. They're just so evocative and so perfect to make art of. A small girl and a large man, and they're both got swords, and it's just perfect for people to do art of. And I really hope we see a rash of Podrick and Brienne pieces.
I think we probably will. I think Podrick really seems to be becoming a fan favorite. The actor is a big part of that. He's got great facial expressions. He's really good at being sheepish and awkward.
He's just so likable.
He is just extremely likable. You're right. That's a great way to put it. He's really likable. So I think the same things with Arya and Sandor. They're likable despite all their, other things that make them unlikable. They're still really likable. There's a lot more good than bad there, and it's the same. Podrick and Brienne, I think they're going to capture a lot of people's attention, sort of the way Sandor and Arya did. There's not as much to feel sorry for there. Arya, you feel we're drawn to her a bit more because of her.
You feel bad for Podrick.
You feel bad for Podrick, but maybe not on the same level you feel bad for Arya.
I feel bad for Sandor.
And you feel bad for Sandor, given his upbringing and everything and all the anger and hate he carries around. Brienne has a lot of the same thing. Brienne also is very disillusioned about knighthood and men in general, and about... Well, I would say she's not as disillusioned because she honestly believes in nobility. She believes in these romantic ideals, but she's starting to realize that very few other people share those ideals but her. Sandor realized it at an early age that knighthood was a bunch of bullshit, because if Gregor can be a knight, then it's all nonsense. If that guy, the murderous, cruel, evil, basically, to use a term that really doesn't have a lot of place in Game of Thrones. I'm throwing it out there casually this time just for the heck of it. If he can be a knight, then it's all nonsense. So, and Brienne is sort of in that vein of kind of coming to realize a lot of what she knows isn't really how people say it is. There's the party line, and then there's the reality. And also, Brienne just doesn't have... Part of the reason she doesn't warm up to Podrick so quickly is she's treated badly by men. All the men that she's pretty much encountered look down on her. Jaime's probably one of the first people that started to treat her like an equal.
And even he didn't from the get-go.
Right, he had to learn that. And so Brienne her guard is up. She's like, this guy's not going to...
And Podrick is just being so nice to her right off the bat. She's even more suspicious.
Yeah, and so... But he wins her over, like he was won over so many of us viewers and fans, by being
That's later. Of
open,
course, but yeah.
He's just open and, right. Yeah.
That's
He's
whatever.
determined. He's sticking to his oath. Even though he's not good at it, he said he'd do it, he's going to do it. You know, I think she
and I think
respects
she does respect that. He's like, why are you doing this? Because I said I would. And that does earn him some points with her, because she follows the knighthood, the ideals of knighthood probably better than any knight we've actually seen. So these two have a lot of potential together, and it's another thing that's a little bit of a fast forward, because a lot of this doesn't happen until a bit later.
I'd like to point out that when Podrick is having trouble riding, that must have been very difficult for him to film. He must have been, a horseman already, or he must have had a lot of lessons, because, it can be hard to look like you're riding that badly without hurting yourself, because you're treating the horse badly, and for him to like show himself as a poor horseman, must have actually been a very good horseman or a very good horse in the scene. I'm not sure which.
It's a good point. I didn't catch that.
And then they're headed to Castle Black as well,
that is a pretty substantial change from the book. They're following different leads basically in the book to look for who they're looking for. Now, one of the other things I wanted to throw out.
Hold on. Did they say they were going to Castle Black?
Yeah, she said Sansa, or she said there's something, the Stark bastard or whatever she said is at the wall. Sansa's brother's at the wall. That if she was going to head somewhere.
She said that Sansa was going to Lysa's. I thought she said she was going.
She said she definitely said Sansa's brother's at the wall. If she was going to head anywhere, she probably would go to Castle Black.
I might have missed. I just remembered what I thought. I thought she said she has a sister there.
Oh, okay.
I thought she said, talking about the veil.
Sister,
that's where I'd go.
Or maybe a sibling. I think she said brother at Castle Black, or and so they're headed up that way. But of course, it's a long way to Castle Black, and there's a lot of leads that they could get along the way that send him off in a different direction, or towards the veil, or whatever.
One last thing I wanted to throw out there about Brienne's initial mistrust of Podrick is that he was Tyrion's squire, and Brienne, of course, like most characters, she doesn't really know Tyrion. She only knows what she's heard about Tyrion, and it's, of course, all bad, because everyone hates Tyrion, even though we know he's a great guy who's honorable and honest and has compassion and sympathy for people.
But still not that great.
But yeah,
he should have prepared Podrick a little better,
Perhaps. Yeah, he's good at pouring wine, but
like, Podrick, go practice, your swords. Yeah.
So that is, and of course, but Brienne could use that to her advantage a bit, because, potentially he might have some information on where Sansa went. He doesn't, but Brienne doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Now we have Arya water dancing and trying to stab Sandor in the gut, but he had armor and a big fucking sword, actually. That's the way he puts it. Or he was describing Meryn Trant's situation there.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more of Sandor's just, look, this is how it is. This is reality. You can't argue with reality. This is the way the world is. Your quote-unquote greatest swordsman who ever lived, who cares how good he was? He didn't have a sword. He was killed by Meryn Trant. How can he be the best swordsman if he was killed by Meryn Trant? Bottom line, if he's not the best swordsman if he doesn't even have a sword and can't beat someone like Meryn Trant. It doesn't matter how good he really was. Even calling him good is irrelevant if he can't fight, or if he's not capable of doing the things that he needs to do. So it's more just, gallows wisdom from Sandor.
I liked Syrio, and so I didn't like to hear Sandor talk bad about him.
Yeah, Arya did not like it either.
It drove her to almost kill him.
And on one hand, it's not fair, because he was sort of taken off guard. If someone killed Sandor in the middle of the night or poisoned him or something, it doesn't mean he wasn't a good warrior,
Right.
But at the same time, he was right. Your greatest swordsman ever's dead. Killed by some asshole I know is not even that good of a fighter. Whatever. He's not the best swordsman.
Yeah.
Show me what he taught you. All right. He didn't teach you to wear armor.
That's what he should have done, yeah.
Don't worry about being the best swordsman ever. Worry about getting some armor.
And it goes. This also touches on what you were talking about. Well, what we've been talking about all season long. Arya's turn to darkness. Her temper, like if she had been strong enough, or if Sandor wasn't wearing armor, she would have just killed him right then. She would have just stabbed him right through the stomach. And some people may have been like, "Whoa, he just slapped her there and knocked her to the ground." Like, first of all, keep in mind what I just said. She really could have killed him. So like him slapping her is kind of nothing compared to that. So it shows Arya, but the point there is Arya's temper. She's got that stark rage, which is apparently was a characteristic that her Aunt Lyanna and her uncle Brandon, who were Ned's
we heard about him
sister
dueling
and brother,
Peter.
Right? Yeah, which were qualities that these two had, and in fact, Catelyn had to ask Brandon not to kill Littlefinger. She was like, please let him live, because even though she wanted to marry Brandon, she still had a fondness for Peter. She thought of him as a brother.
Yeah.
She basically friend-zoned him big time. And not that wasn't fair or right. Like, who wants to be Littlefinger's lover besides crazy Lysa? So I like the scene a lot. Of course, all these Arya Sandor scenes are great, and once again, it's just a really good Sandor just telling it like it is. He's got this harsh view of reality, and he's just trying to educate Arya. He's like, look, little girl, the world is not what you think it is. It is harsh, and this is what matters. Big swords and armor. This is what matters. Skill
might makes right.
Yeah, skill is great, but sometimes just having a breastplate is more important than being skilled, and having a bigger sword than your opponent. These little things, I really like that a lot. It's this harsh dose of reality, which is a common theme throughout all of the Song of Ice and Fire, which is coming to terms with what's real, and which is an interesting thing to have in a fantasy series.
We got to see some cool stunts from Arya too, and during her water dancing.
Hand flip
I thought it was
there,
cool. I'm sure Maisie Williams is enjoying that. I guess she did that little flip herself, which is pretty impressive. I guess maybe maybe they got a stunt double that was her size, but it probably was her, and I thought it was cool. He's talking about the dancing and all that, because Maisie Williams is a dancer in real life.
Oh, cool!
If you looked her up, she does all these cool. She's been dancing for years and years, and she was a dancer before. She was on Game of Thrones even, and so that was her. Some of that she got to use, I think, in the water dancing.
Very nice.
Maybe made it easier for her.
All right, so we move on to Oberyn and Cersei.
Yeah.
Important reveal from this scene. We have confirmation that Oberyn's 8 daughters are in the show. They were certainly in the books, and we weren't sure. They hadn't been mentioned yet.
We were very concerned.
Yeah, we thought maybe they'd chop that number down to 1 or 4, or who knows.
Yeah.
And it's good to see them all accounted for. They may certainly there'll be some changes to them, I would expect, but the number 8 is at least maintained.
I think that in terms of show lines, just one line that makes fans so happy. I think this season had the 2 lines that made fans the most happy, which were Sir Pounce. That's just 2 words, and it made all Song of Ice and Fire fans, I feel like, we're like, yeah. And then this one, you have several daughters, and he's like 8, and just 1 word, and everyone's like, yes.
Yeah,
I was like, that just made the whole episode for me. I could forgive them for so much. I'm like, I'm so relieved. I was positive that they would at least pare it down a little bit.
I thought so too. I fist pumped for sure when I heard that. When we looked at 8, we looked at each other and we're like, yes.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Does he have 8 children, all of whom are daughters?
Yes.
Yes.
He has
8
no
daughters.
sons. Yes, he has no sons.
They're called the Sand Snakes.
We don't know if it's, of course, because they're all Sand. That's the bastard name for noble bastard.
Like Elia Sand.
Yeah, it's a perfect nickname there. We haven't heard them referred to as the Sand Snakes in the show yet, but I assume they will be. Why not? It doesn't. That seems to be fits with how they've already been described. Now,
does he have an official wife?
No.
No
official wife.
He's not married. He has 4 of his children are with Ilaria.
With the
younger 4, including the one he mentioned, Elia.
The one he said that was a problem. That's the oldest of the 4 he has with her.
Okay.
And so the other 4 are
with different women.
All 4 with different women. And we don't know if the show will keep the same group, but real quickly, they are Obara, whose mother is an Old Town whore, and she is kind of a fighter type, kind of blunt and aggressive. I'm going to mess up the order of the rest here. One of them is Nymeria, who is...
Are you naming his other wives or his daughters?
His daughters. Okay. Who is the daughter of a Septon, or a Septa? Or is that Tyene?
Tyene.
That's Tyene. Okay, so Nym has her father's skill with poisons. and Tyene is courtly and skilled
And blonde
and very good looking and skilled at court. And then
there's Sorella.
There is Sorella, who is
very darker skinned.
Darker skinned. Her mother was a Summer Islander, and she is known to be, studious and learning.
Studious. Yeah.
And we don't know whether
there's Yulia here,
whose nickname is Lady Lance, and she is
difficult, as he says.
Difficult, as he says, and she is a tomboy, and she's a fighter as well, and Lady Lance because she likes to joust. So she's also very free with her sexuality. So these are things from the books we don't know.
Pretty much most people in Dorne are more free with their sexuality, But so it's not like Elia is exactly an outlier, extreme outlier there. As we saw with Oberyn and Ilaria.
That's very true.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they do. That's the book versions of those characters. So all you who either knew that already, we're repeating something you already knew, or we're reminding you of how that works. Yeah. People who aren't aware of those characters, well, keep an eye out for them. Maybe they'll appear, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll change some of those details. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't think any of them have been... It doesn't appear that any of them have been cast for this season, though. Mm-mm. So...
That'd be a big secret.
It'll be a little while. Yeah, that would have been pretty sneaky. So we'll see what happens with them later.
Yeah.
Now, Cersei brings up this great point about power dynamics, about how both of them are extremely powerful people. She lists off the reasons why she's powerful and the reasons why Oberyn is powerful, and yet neither of them could prevent these horrible things happening to their family. And Oberyn, of course, calmly points out, well, we can, which is a bit of a barb towards her family, say, well, we can still get revenge. And Cersei's like, well, yeah, we can do that. But
not just a barb toward her family. It might also be I don't know how to say it, but like a connection.
Threat, perhaps.
No, not a threat. Okay. A reining in. You want to get back at Tyrion. I'm the judge. Right, we can get revenge.
Right. Yes. That is certainly seems to be part of her angle there.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly why she went to see him. That's the whole purpose of this whole conversation.
She's making herself seem vulnerable, and when she's talking about Myrcella, he's like, "Oh, I feel bad." She's trying to get to his soft spot.
It actually,
and she knows he has children, so she thinks he's going to be, she knows has a soft spot for children. Oberyn does, so her talking about Myrcella, who he's even met, is definitely going to make him a little more amenable to her.
And it's good. It's quality manipulation by Cersei. She's touching on all the right heartstrings with him, saying, "Look, the children." Because we've already seen Oberyn say, "We don't do those things. We don't do bad things to little girls in Dorne." And Cersei reminds him of the truth, which is that little girls have bad things happen to them all over the world, which is also true in the real world, and is a great line in the show that does not exist in the books.
Yeah, I was when you were talking about 2 lines so far in the season that you've been so excited about, I was like, those are the 2 lines. But I haven't read the book, so those weren't meaningful.
Well, they just made book readers stand up, like, you hear that line, you're like, that's a good line, but you're not like, yes, Cersei said this line, and there's just
it's like, yes, little girls everywhere get hurt.
Yeah,
I thought you it's not like a line you're pumped to hear, but it was a good line. It's one of my favorite lines from the show. Is when she says,
other lines I said weren't about the lines, it was just about the confirmation
of sticking to the canon.
Yeah,
and this is actually a great segue to something that Oberyn mentions, which is the Water Gardens. Now, the Water Gardens were built by a Dornish prince who married the first Targaryen princess, the first one to marry into the Dornish people. So her name was also Daenerys, by the way. She was the first Daenerys Targaryen. And
Water Gardens are along a beach.
Right, they're basically fountains. And the thing about the Water Gardens, and I wonder if the show will get into this, it's a very interesting philosophical outtake you can get from the Water Gardens, which is that they're a place when Daenerys... Remember, this is Daenerys the First, not Daenerys Stormborn. At one point, she's at the Water Gardens, and Dorne gets really hot, and this is one of the reasons the Water Gardens were built, is because it's cool, it cools people off, it's a way to play in the water and to kind of beat the heat of Dorne. While she's there, she notices that some of the younger children of some of the nobles that are allowed to attend the Water Garden, she has this moment of clarity where she realizes that the children are all the same. When their clothes are off and they're playing in the water, they're all the same. There's no difference. She can't tell the difference between the highborn kids and the lowborn kids. They're just all children. And
Which one is mine again?
Yeah, and Prince Oberyn, or rather Prince Doran, who is Prince Oberyn's older brother, who is, you know, crippled by gout. He loves the Water Gardens. He is a big believer in protecting the children, and he believes that the children are what everyone should be protective of, and that it's all about the children. He has kind of a modern viewpoint on how important upbringing is, and how any decision a ruler makes needs to take account of the children and how it's going to affect them. It's a very modern viewpoint that very few other people in Westeros share or even have concept of. What's
Are there
that?
bathing suits in Westeros?
I don't think so, but they might have some sort of...
Like shorts that they wear? Or like
I
a
don't
little
know.
ship that's just turns see-through? I'm like, I'm
know.
just curious. I can't recall what they were wearing in the books. You know, if they're just like, you know, Marcella's just wearing like a shift. Or, you know,
Yeah, that's a good
topless with shorts. I don't know what. Certainly they're not in little swimsuits.
But this whole instance of the Water Garden, this whole concept of all the kids being equal, this is a great parallel to what Oberyn is saying about how we don't hurt we treat children differently in Dorne. And I think this is kind of what they're getting at. They're trying to get the same point across, that Dorne's culture, at least amongst certain people, is a bit more progressive towards the children and their rights and how important they are towards the future of everything. Mm-hmm. And Oberyn is getting this point across to us show viewers that this is a little bit of a difference.
You kind of think that if there was a water garden in King's Landing, who would play in the water garden? Certainly not the Lowborn, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, no,
I would,
right.
you know, I don't know who would play in it.
To fill out the rest of the Water Garden story from history, eventually Daenerys allows all the kids to play. It was at first just the highborns and some of the children of wealthy people, but eventually it was just open to children. And that is, like Ashaya said, that would not happen at court, at the royal court. People like, can you imagine someone like Cersei allowing lowborn or even middleborn children to be playing with her children? You can't even imagine that. Like, that's just... Yeah. This social hierarchy is much more rigid. So, yet another example of why Dorne is different. And so we have the difference of Dorne intertwined with this whole notion of the children and protecting the children and how important they are, and Cersei trying to get in with Oberyn with regard to this trial and say, hey, this is about my children too, and how my child was killed, and you are about justice for the children. Well, what about my child? You know, even my child deserves justice. Mm-hmm. And Oberyn looks at her funny after when she walks away after this heartfelt description of how Myrcella's been taken from her and how Myrcella's all alone and away from the people she knows. You can tell Oberyn's a little confused. He's like, was that genuine? Gives her the look when she's walking away, like, was that genuine emotion for her? And to what you were saying before, she's maybe manipulating him. So it shows that if she was trying to manipulate him, he's wary. He's not entirely fooled. If he's fooled at all, he's certainly not sold on it. But it did get him thinking, at least. So certainly more to see with that. Any more thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, I did just want to point out that I like that line. Everywhere in the world, they're her little girls. And
sad but true.
Yeah, and I also like that it was another moment where I was suspicious of Cersei's true emotions, her true intentions there. I just couldn't help but think, is she just telling him all this even if on some level, how terrible Cersei's character must be for me to phrase that, even if on some level Cersei misses her daughter,
of course she is. Like,
she's probably still just using it to manipulate Oberyn, you know.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't really want, with the way she is, with her level of paranoia and her levels of pride, she doesn't want to give people a weapon to use against her, showing how much she cares about her kids. But once it's out in the open,
and
like a lot of these other things, she may as well make it her strength.
He also seems to be demonstrating, we're not going to use your kid against you. You know what I mean? He said it in an earlier scene. He's saying it again. So maybe she's like, okay, fine.
It's almost a point of pride.
Against me, I'm going to use her against you.
Yeah, it's almost a point of pride with Oberyn. He's like, we're better than you. We wouldn't do that. We won't stoop to that level. Mm-hmm. And Cersei's like, okay, you want to stoop to that level? Okay, well, I'm going to use it, like you said, I'm going to use that against you then. Well, don't forget to not stoop to that level. My daughter, she's a kid. Don't, she's one of them.
Couldn't Cersei have just had that ship sailed down without Oberyn?
Yeah,
Oberyn just was like, I'll have someone sail it down there. It's like, not like Oberyn's taking it down there.
He's like, she's trying to get him to go with it. Like, you can go back there too. You don't have to be here anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if that, we'll see that ship again.
Yeah. So back to Podrick and Brienne. Podrick showing more ineptitude.
Oh, wait, one more thing.
Oh.
I did think that it was very good that the line, everywhere in the world they hurt little girls, was set in an episode that had a lot of Sansa and Arya.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And right after we see some Sansa and Arya stuff.
And Mira.
And Mira.
Oh, and
that
Mira.
Is true.
Big one,
that
yes.
is true.
And the other girls up there.
Yeah, and the other
Craster's
girls,
Keep.
yeah.
That's
They're not
a good
exactly
point.
little girls, but yeah. They're more full-grown women, most of them, but yes. Point taken.
So, let's go to Podrick and Brienne, and again, Podrick is winning us over more with his
It's great cooking.
his clever ineptitude, or his winning awkwardness, trying to combine two words that don't fit. And this is when Brienne starts to sort of soften a bit on her stance, both towards him and about her going it alone. From just very necessary terms in that, look, this is new armor, and she can't even, she can't
it's
get
all
it up.
stiff and tight, probably,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess
like,
is the point.
maybe she
it's just
does
different
need help
armor,
with her armor.
and she will always need help with it, but maybe her old armor was just worn in, and it was just easy to pull.
I don't know how anyone can get a breastplate on without help. I guess you just don't take it off. Sleep with it on and just take off the other parts. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But in any case, Podrick talking about how he killed a Kingsguard was a bit of a winning moment for him, getting Brienne to trust him more and to kind of let her guard down. Partly because she believed him, and he was humble about it, and he didn't act like he was some big hero. He's like, no, I stabbed him in the back of the head. I didn't fight him, per se. I killed him. Yeah. And it's basically, now the only difference from how he kills Mandon Moore in the show, or in the book, is that he pushes him into the water and Mandon Moore drowns. It's not that different. In any case, it was a blow from behind that kills the man. And in both cases, Mandon was trying to kill Tyrion. So one thing that's a bit funny to me about the scene. It's not a complaint, but it's something that was a little curious. Brienne doesn't at all react to Tyrion was almost killed by a Kingsguard. That's strange. She reacts to, you killed a Kingsguard, which is also very strange. So it's almost that was such a surprise that she didn't realize the other really surprising thing he said. And maybe she'll dawn on her later, like, wait a minute, a Kingsguard was trying to kill Tyrion? Why is that? So, but it's not important. It's just an interesting, noteworthy little bit there. Other thoughts on the scene, Sean?
No, nothing particular. I guess I like the moment there where Brienne also maybe recognized that she does need help, and also thought it was neat, that Podrick he's not like showboating around about how he killed a Kingsguard. He didn't bring it up till she asked him, and I think even aside from being Kingsguard, him having killed someone probably, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but I can imagine among warriors, among fighting people, having killed someone or not killed someone is like this litmus test to, whether it's your willingness to do it or your ability to deal with it after the fact or whatever. But
yeah, it's very well said. I agree with that. Ashaya, what do you think?
Nothing. I said everything I needed to about Podrick and Brienne in the other scene.
Okay.
I will say before we go, because we're about to go, the rest of the episode was all up there in the north, right?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Before we get to that, there's one other point I wanted to make. I think there's probably multiple I wanted to make, but one other I can remember at the moment. Back with Littlefinger and that storyline, something that it bothers me a little bit, because I feel like they've made a particular point of how careful and calculating Littlefinger is.
Yeah.
They even had a conversation with Sansa about who would trust and why, and it was kind of trying to lead her to answers about his, motivations or whatever, And it all seemed a lot to do with, what he was risking, what he was willing to risk, who he could trust with what information, and so on. So it seemed a little weird to me that they let this little boy, who even just random little boy, I don't know if you could trust with this kind of secret. But he is not just a random little boy. He seems to be a little off. And also...
Not very tactful.
Is right, and is also kind of in the midst of people who might know or care about these relationships. And so just telling him, hey, this is your cousin, but don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, now go to your room. Like, oh, that doesn't seem like the same kind of care Littlefinger puts in. And it bothered me, too, because I feel like they could have pretty easily handled that by just having having Robin come in after she was introduced or beforehand or something like that, you know. But it got a little bit worse for me, I think, when and I could chalk that up to like maybe I'm reading too much into it or the editing or whatever, you know. But I feel like on one hand it gets a little bit worse when we see Lysa, how volatile she is. She kind of goes off on Sansa and I'm like, whoa, Littlefinger trusts this woman also? I don't know if Littlefinger's trusting the right people. And on one hand, I'm a little afraid for Lysa. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up dead. I don't know if Littlefinger can trust her.
Yeah, you could saw when they were kissing, he's like, I've got to shut her up.
Shut her up.
Yes,
yeah, like some guard could overhear this or something, or maybe Sansa walks back in the room or something.
So I was going to say, or I guess I did say, but on one hand, I kind of fear for Lysa. But there's another part of me that feels like she deserves to die as much as Littlefinger and 18 other people in this show. She murdered her husband and set up the Lannisters and who knows what
raised her child horribly.
So much. She's... You know, I hate to have the idea that anyone deserves to die. I don't know, but on one hand, I fear for her. On the other hand, maybe she deserves to die. But another thought I had along with that too is Littlefinger does trust her. Maybe that's telling. Maybe her commitment to him is very strong. Maybe he knows how much she loves him.
She is in love with him.
And
he's kept it quiet for this many years.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And how much he can trust her based on that. But still, I'm not so trusting of the kid. We'll see how that plays out.
Well, here's the thing about that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't Littlefinger who introduced her to little Robert. It was Lysa who said, "This is your cousin."
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So if Littlefinger had his way, the information might not have been explained that way.
Yeah.
So I think that in defense of his planning, I think that maybe he just didn't foresee Lysa blurting that out right away.
I can't help but wonder where this is going. What's Littlefinger's... I mean, of course,
remember that he's
mysterious in the first place, but what's his plan with Sansa? I feel like, because it's so risky, if someone's like, oh, hey, isn't that Sansa, Ned Stark's daughter, wanted for murder of the king, hanging out with Littlefinger? What's she doing there? Like, how is that going to play out for Littlefinger? Like, I wonder, is he waiting for some other trigger? Is he going to plant Sansa somewhere else? Is it going to be next week? 8 years from now? Is Sansa just going to be a prisoner in his castle?
Well, remember that...
literally going to be a prisoner?
Remember that they're planning to marry her to Robert Arryn.
When? Like,
when is this?
That's
unclear.
Before or after she goes on trial for treason?
Once Tyrion is executed,
well, she said once he's executed. That was what they said.
Tyrion is dead. She's still married to Tyrion legally, and of course, there's maybe an annulment, but certainly the political landscape isn't. Sansa can't just go to the High Septon. Littlefinger can't go there and get an annulment.
I'm just trying to put myself in Tywin's shoes when he hears about this wedding announcement. But is he gonna be like, okay, cool, yeah, we'll attend? Or is he gonna be like, wait a minute, she's wanted for murdering my grandson, the king? I don't know where Littlefinger thinks this is gonna go. So I should think about it more. But that's a thing I'm pondering at the moment.
He may have to. It may depend on how the trial goes. Like what things come out in the trial. Did Sansa get? Is she made culpable or not? What does Tyrion say about her? How did So I think a lot. That's part of why he needs to keep her secret, and maybe his plan won't work because
who
of
does
how
Littlefinger want to be in power? Will Tywin?
Which makes me extra afraid because I can imagine if it starts to fall apart, Littlefinger's like, well, Sansa thing's not working. Someone go kill Sansa. Bolt through the heart.
Well, that which of course no one else has access to her at this point. Anyone killing Sansa, it would have to be someone in the Eyrie.
I suppose. What if Littlefinger finds out that Bran and Rickon are still alive too? Then Sansa's not as valuable a prize there, also.
Yeah, but he's still in love with her, so he's not just going to dispose of her. He's got feelings for her that are beyond his plotting, which
make him a little more irrational and a little less careful as well. He has, Yeah.
He's not gonna. He may not be thinking.
He did say he wanted everything. I want to be king and marry Sansa.
So you're right that it is difficult to perceive his end game here.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes him so good is that he's even said that line. He's like, if your enemies don't know what you want, it makes them hard to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of explains what we're all sitting here thinking right now. What the hell is he doing next?
And I will say, Sean, you mentioned how, you thought Littlefinger was being a little more careless with this, and I do think that in the books he was a little careless with regards to some of these things. But like I said, with the Elaine Stone thing and like with Sansa's hidden identity stuff, like he was a lot more careful in the books, and that was why I was concerned about that. Is like
before they were anywhere near the castle, she had already dyed her hair.
Yeah, she dyed her hair. Put your hood up, at least put your hood up before you're walking through, or whatever. So we'll see.
There's one other thing actually I wanted to mention from the Vale scenes that is important. Littlefinger pushed for the wedding to be more public because he is marrying into the lordship of the Vale, and in terms of legitimacy, in terms of other people recognizing his right to be in that position, it's important for them to witness this wedding and to make a big event out of it. But Lysa, she was just too eager and wouldn't allow that to happen. In the book, it's even less public. They get married at Littlefinger's little keep, which is way out in the fingers, where there's like just a few common people as witness, and there's it's not even held in a castle. So it's extremely off the radar, but so Littlefinger, that's not what he wanted. But Lysa's a bit unhinged, and he has to give her what she wants. So anyway, we should move on to the final scene, which has a whole lot of different things going on.
Start off with
Locke, who is, of course, not long for this world in this scene. He doesn't last very long. Yeah. And he shows off his cleverness, and his plan almost worked, I suppose, but he gets his neck snapped by Hodor, as we saw.
Yeah. Now, first he looks in the little hut that Bran and them are in, and he sees them in there, which I was actually confused about. I thought, and we had to go back and look, I thought Bran and his group were like in the main Craster's Keep building with the fire. They were. I thought they were in there, and then Locke snuck in and like looked in there, and then like he saw Ghost and Summer, and that's what he was warning Jon about. That's what I thought. I thought he was telling don't look over there because he didn't want Jon to see Ghost. But as it turns out, the little hut he was referring to was where Bran and Jojen and them were. They were kept in a little separate room, which I totally didn't get. And
so he was lying to the brothers about the presence of hounds. He was saying, hey, look, there's hounds over here in the area where actually it's Bran and Hodor and Jojen and Mira. And that's how he was trying to keep the brothers from noticing Bran. And so that way he can go in there during the fight, escape the melee, go in there, make off with Bran, and he's got no worries that the other brothers will check that place out because
lucky that they put him in a different little hut.
True. And of course, this plan also may not have worked because once they're all having a big melee, who cares about the hound starting to bark? But all he needed was for them to hesitate going over there and to get through the fracas and get to that building and then get away quickly, which he did. But he didn't count on Hodor becoming a fearsome giant, breaking free of his chains and snapping his neck. That no one could have really foreseen that happening. So Locke, you almost did it. You just didn't count on the supernatural.
But before that, we have Jojen and Bran talking.
Yes.
And Jojen has a very funny line to me where he says, "You're not here." And it's funny because he's not there in the books. He's really not there.
Very good.
We have that, and then we have that Jojen's vision that he sees with the werewood there, and him on his hand on fire.
A bit more about that in the spoilery after credits section of this episode, because we have some thoughts on that. It's not entirely clear what's happening there, but we will talk about it after the credits.
Yeah, just hand on fire.
I found myself almost turn off. It got so mystical there.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to make of all this. It was too much to absorb. I'm just going to go on with the rest of the scene and not perplex myself.
I think they're trying really hard to show Bran as being really important and, as you said, mystical. And, he could be like the savior and he's really important. And it's just not hitting. It's just not, I don't dislike Bran, but his scenes, his plotline scenes, especially with this Craster stuff, are my least favorite.
I've thought about. I think that it's on one hand mystical, prophetic stuff like this is it's a good tool sometimes. It's a good way to hint at what's coming and
get people excited about
create
it.
irony and so on. But you can't let it get too specific. You can't just say what's going to happen, you know. And I even appreciate how it's handled here with Melisandre, for example. She has these sort of visions, this sort of knowledge, but it's not comprehensive. She doesn't exactly know what's going to happen. She doesn't necessarily understand why things are going to happen. She may know, she may be correct with some statement like, a darkness is coming. But is the darkness the evilness of the Lannisters, or this wildling army, or Dany's dragons? You know, what is this darkness is coming? Does she even know what it is? She just vaguely knows we need to be ready, and Stannis is a big part of it. But so Bran may just vaguely know, I'm gonna save Westeros.
I need to go find the three-eyed raven. Yeah.
He just has these vague things that he needs to do, which it's, on one hand, I understand why they need him to have vague things to do, but on the other hand, it makes me harder to engage. I don't know what to root for. I don't know what what am I hoping he succeeds. I know what I want Jon to do. I wanted Jon to go kill all those bad rangers and free those girls. I know that I want Tyrion to not be put to death in his trial and to get what he's, you know, other characters have like these missions and these paths and these goals that they're working toward, and you kind of root for them, and when it's not going their way, you're sad, and when it does go their way, you're pumped. But with Bran, I don't know if it's going his way. I don't know what I'm supposed to get pumped for, so I guess I'll just accept that there's some symbol to fire. Okay, let's go. You know, that's it.
Yeah.
What else?
I thought it could be some sort of prediction based on what he was saying to Carl, that he's perhaps predicting his own death, and that he's predicting his own funeral pyre. Or
You're saying, when will I know?
Burned.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that we know that Jojen's going to die later, but he does seem to be like because the tenor of that scene.
If he did die in the north, they would want to burn his body.
Right, and one of the takeaways from that scene is Jojen is saying to Bran, "Look, we don't matter. You're the one who matters. If you're the one who has to escape. If we don't escape, well, that sucks, but it's not.
Bran
a lot isn't
can't
depending on
travel
us
without them, though.
Right.
Like,
well, he needs Hodor at least, but
yeah, he needs Hodor.
but that's what Jojen is saying. He's like, look, my own life is not that important.
You know,
it's your life.
Getting big.
Yeah, that's true. You can ride on him.
You need a saddle.
Well, that
Bran's
saddle,
getting big too.
You know?
I did think it was a neat little moment there when. I wish I could remember the exchange, but there was a moment where Jojen seemed sort of defeated. It seemed like, oh, what can I do? You know, Miriam's like, you need water. That doesn't matter. I don't need water. She said, oh, no, it does matter. And someone said, but he says, Bran, you can't let him stop you. And Bran's like, they already have stopped me. And Jojen, who seemed to be giving up himself when he detects this from Bran, he's like, no, you can't give up. You're the chosen one.
Yeah, he's like, I was giving up because I don't matter, but you matter.
You matter, yeah. So.
Now, there's a line that Jojen says frequently in the books when it seems like he's in danger and his sister tells him to take care in some way or another, and he repeats this line several times, and it's, today is not the day that I die. And because he has this visions, and so he has this, which is why he is so brave when facing down Carl, telling him that I've seen you dead. This is this obviously murderous, vicious, cruel man that he's tied up, and he's saying these things to this guy in complete confidence. So you can tell, the takeaway from that is that Jojen has a lot of confidence in his visions.
Yeah.
He knows that Carl's not going to hurt him because he's already seen what's going to happen. And he knows that he's going to make it out of it alive. He may not live a whole lot longer, but he knows he's going to survive tonight.
That would be my fear, that he may know that he's not going to kill him, but he doesn't know he's not going to hurt him. I still want to get punched in the face, man.
Yeah. Okay, so we gotta get through the rest of the scene here, so we can keep this under 2 hours.
We've got some unnecessary sexual violence there with
it's really just getting old, I think. Yeah. I feel like we even said this last week. It's not that it's not realistic. It's not that these guys wouldn't do exactly that. These guys are terrible people. That rape is completely in their wheelhouse. It's just that we just don't need to keep seeing it. It's just overdone. The device of sensationalism. I mean, it's.
I was scared they were going to go farther than they did. I'm glad it wasn't worse.
Yeah, I was.
The only silver lining.
That was her that they were dragging out in the snow when Locke was scouting?
No, that wasn't her.
Okay, it wasn't her.
That was another one.
I thought it was at first, but then decided it must not have been her. But I was questioning it.
The only slight positive thing from that is that Ellie Kendrick did a really convincing job
Yes,
there. Her acting
very
was
good.
awesome. The other actors as well did a good job
Yeah, it
of
was-
showing their fear, and so at least I can appreciate that. There's always something positive to take
Yeah.
away even from these things, because at least the acting is good.
Yeah, but bottom line, they don't. Realistic as it is, they could have avoided that scene.
Yeah.
But anyways, continue on. We have Bran skin changing Hodor, which
Major
of course,
moment there.
Yeah, which of course was foreshadowed the first previously on of the episode. We see that happen.
Now I want to add in something here real quick about that Hodor moment, which Hodor is a fan favorite for kind of obvious reasons, I think. And he is a small, not small literally, but small character in terms of his role, who is, like I said, a fan favorite. Now, a lot of characters who are fan favorites have been cut from the show because they're just not important. Now, I don't see how they could have cut Hodor because Bran needs to be carried around. His being crippled is too important to the show, or to the series in general. But one thing that doesn't happen, this is not something that happens in the book, is Hodor killing somebody. So I think it's almost like a give back. The showrunners took away a lot of these not important characters that are fan favorites. And so what they're doing here is they're giving a little more dimension to Hodor. Hodor has that moment of he's revolted by what he's just done. He's killed somebody. And Hodor is an extremely gentle person. And he has this moment, he's looking at his own hands. He's like, what did I just do? I can't believe I did this. He's disgusted. So I like that. They're giving Hodor a little more dimension. And that, perhaps this will come up later. Hodor having a little...
Bran has to deal with
Something
Bran himself has to deal with the
Good job
that too.
Good job of acting by Christian Nairn there as well.
Yeah, you seem a little more assertive about what Hodor was considering there, because maybe from the books, I don't know how it goes, but
Hodor doesn't kill anyone in the books.
Well, what I mean is what it's like for Hodor or Bran when Bran takes Hodor over, because I couldn't tell if Hodor knew what he even did. I couldn't tell if he was like coming to and trying to figure out, why am I standing? I thought I was tied up. How are my hands free? Or if he was like, I just killed that guy. I couldn't tell where he was. I didn't know if he knew what he had done and was like troubled by it, or if he didn't know how he got outside. Okay. I didn't know which thing was.
That's a good point. I feel like he knew it was happening, and from the books you can tell that, like, Bran's description of Hodor's personality while he's in him, it's like Hodor's hiding in a corner. It's like Hodor's consciousness is hiding in a corner. He's still there, but he's just as passive as he always is. Like, someone's pushing on him and exerting aggression towards him or dominating him, and he just accepts it. So I kind of get the impression from the books that Hodor is aware of what's happening on some level, but he's just accepting it because he's.
Whereas if you were to skin
so
change
passive.
into another
person,
another person, they would be fighting. You know,
there might be a struggle.
Like,
Bran couldn't just control him.
Yeah,
or
Bran
whatever,
just couldn't do it, and yeah.
So that's, and it's interesting that you point that out. I didn't even consider that he was just maybe not aware of what's happening, because I thought the way he looked at the blood on his hands, and then they showed him looking, they showed the corpse again.
Yeah, I thought he was like, "What have I done?"
Yeah,
I considered that, but I also considered that he might be stunned as to how, because he was tied up inside and now he's standing up outside, and so
yeah,
I thought he might just be confused by where he is, but I think it is more interesting for him to be taken aback by his own actions, you know. But I don't even know if he understands that Bran took him over, or, you know, I don't know.
Now, one thing that is seems to be, perhaps I just wasn't noticing as much, one thing that's becoming perhaps more common in the show, but maybe they've been doing it all along and I just didn't catch it, is that they throw homages to scenes, to book scenes that they've cut out by kind of adding them in other places. And that happens in this scene where we have Carl fighting Jon, and Carl points out the difference in fighting with honor and not fighting with honor. He says, look at, like, fighting without honor is, who cares about honor when you're fighting? This is about life and death. This is about winning. And Carl's like, basically is kind of telling Jon, the reason I'm alive, the reason I got through my horrible, you know, street urchin upbringing as a badass was because I was willing to do whatever it took. There's such thing as dirty fighting. There's just fighting. And it all goes. And that, to me, is a throwback to a conversation Dany and Jorah have very early in the series, where Dany talks about how her brother Rhaegar was a noble and honorable fighter. And Jorah says, Rhaegar fought nobly, Rhaegar fought honorably, Rhaegar died. And it's a great line that tells you so much. And I think Carl is basically getting that same point across in this scene. So I thought that There's some problems with this entire scene. I thought the fight scene was kind of cool, kind of not cool at the same time. There's some things about it I thought that were silly, some things I thought that were kind of awesome and just gritty, which I like that in fight scenes when they get gritty and kind of realistic. Although some parts of it were very not realistic. So I like that. I like that throwback. I like that getting that concept in there.
I had a question about that. Well, for one, Jojen gets Bran to leave. There was that scene like right before the fight there. Okay, so all mutineers are dead, so they don't know. No one but Craster's women know that Bran and his group were there. Is Jon going, Jon thought Bran was there. Is Jon going to talk to them more about this? Is Jon going to, still think Bran's out there? Is he going to be looking for Bran still, Is he going, at first I was like, no one knows Bran was there, okay, but then I was like, oh yeah, the Craster's Keep woman just now. I was like, they know.
My fear is that that's just going to be an oversight.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep going.
That's kind of my fear.
Yeah.
I feel like Jon would just ask them. He'd be like, was anyone else here? To the Craster's Keep woman. They'd be like, there was a Stark. They were there and they heard that, or maybe those ones are dead, but
of course
they know that
I suppose maybe
there was a giant.
Kept secret. It might have been kept secret. That might be why they were kept in that farther away place. Maybe he didn't want. Maybe Carl knew to not let them.
I'm trying to look back and see. I felt like at one point
there was a chance for them to know about it.
Yeah, this whole time I thought that they were in the same keep, so I guess they could have been. I'll have to look back, but I felt like they were. I felt like they were around them, but maybe not. I'm just getting a little confused. Those two rooms look so similar.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of curious if they know that. That would be a way for them to get away with that, because, at first I thought, okay, no one knows Bran was ever there. Everyone who knew that is dead. I don't know how Jon's going to react to that. He still thinks Bran's out there.
It was a little unclear to me, too, what those women were going to do. Because it sounded to me like they said, we don't want to go with you, we're going to stay here. Now let's burn it down.
Yeah.
Maybe
they're going to stay in that little hut.
Maybe they kept the side building where Bran. They didn't burn. They only burnt the main key. That's what we're joking about. It's like maybe they should have waited till morning until burning this down.
They could have recycled the wood.
Slowly burn it down over time and use that firewood.
Yeah,
it is a good question. You know what? I suspect they may just join up with Mance Rayder's party. The wild, because that's where pretty much all the other wildlings are.
The thing is, as we sit here and try to think of what might have been the smart thing to do. What these women have been through, they're not making wise decisions necessarily. I can imagine it might be psychologically important to burn that building down. More valuable than maybe even living. It might be rather freeze to death than have that building continue to stand, reminding us of our horrors. But
two other things. One, I guess this was the gross spit episode because we have two spitting scenes. We have the Craster's woman does it, and Carl spits in his face. Gross to me. I hate that. But in all that we complain about the sexual violence towards women and all that, and I dislike it, and there was two things in the episode that made me feel a little bit better about it, which is that the Craster's Keep women get some agency in that. First, one of them, helps Jon kill Carl. Mm-hmm. Which is massive. Just that alone, I was like, okay, good. They're not just helpless victims.
Yeah, they wanted a piece of him too. Jeez.
And then later that they made their own choice, whether it was the foolish choice or whatever. They chose not to go with the Night's Watch, and that was good for me. I'm glad that they showed that.
They're not just going to rely on the men to protect them. They're going to go make their own way. Yeah, that's cool. I like that too.
I know. Also, Ghost got his revenge on Rast, and that was foreshadowed when Rast was pouring the stuff out in front of Ghost. You knew that Ghost was going to get him.
You're not going to let me drink water? I'm going to drink your blood.
Yeah, we were joking. We were like, he should have run into that hutch.
Yeah, he should have hidden in the cage. That's the only place Ghost couldn't get him. They find him there later. Jon comes up and is like, oh, look at there's Rast in there. They would have just taken
water out in front of him.
They would have just hung him or executed him right there. But okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit about the preview. What's in the preview scenes? We're going to talk about some book spoiler stuff, and we're going to do our credits. So, Sean, thanks for joining us again.
Scram!
Check us out on Facebook. It's time to roll our voice credits here. Check us out on Facebook.
Yeah, you can check us out. I can do it this time.
Okay.
You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/WesterosHistory or searchable under History of Westeros. You can go to our website, historyofwesteros.com, our forums, historyofwesteros.com/forums. Yeah, I know. Wow, what a shock.
Lots of great discussions happening there.
You can check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/WesteroShistory. And you can always email us, of course, on our Gmail, which is westeroshistory@gmail.com. Whether you're listening to this on iTunes or just the audio version or watching us on YouTube, we do have both iTunes pages and YouTube pages. We certainly appreciate all subscribers, all reviews, all ratings. We especially like the iTunes reviews because those are a little bit more sparse, so we don't get as many of those. So, if you have iTunes, take the time to do it. I don't have iTunes. I hate Apple. But if you have iTunes, I won't hate you if you'll leave us a review. So...
But otherwise, she'll hate you. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Of course, also feel free to leave us a donation. We very much appreciate donations. They help us put out episodes more often as we have to earn money in the time where we're not working on Game of Thrones projects. So it's a great way to show your support, and we appreciate anything you can do. If everyone out there were to give us a couple of dollars, we would have a lot of episodes coming out. We're certainly capable of doing it.
If every one of our subscribers gave us $1...
we'd put out a lot of episodes.
More out.
It's true. If we could do this for a living, we would. In other words, we could spend more time doing this. But that's just not. We have to work sometimes too. So, any dollar you guys give us is getting another episode out sooner. It's that simple. So we appreciate whatever you can do, and just of course comments and votes and upvotes and likes and all those things help us too, because they help us bring in new people that might donate to us later. And we're working on ways to get some potential products and some other ways to monetize the podcast that aren't going to be obnoxious. We would like to not have obnoxious commercials, but we do want to try and make more of a go of this so that we can do more of it, and that would be great for everybody.
We could have obnoxious T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yes, in fact, we've talked about that. We don't have time to go into too much detail with that.
We're just not sure what site is the best, what site gives you the largest cut and has the best quality of shirts. Like we could be on Redbubble, which is where you got not that shirt, but another shirt. But anyways, we could be there, but I'm not sure what percent we get, whether 50% or 10%.
So these are all things in the idea stage. Some of you out there, the reason we're discussing it openly with a lot of you out there, just kind of having this conversation on the podcast, is that a lot of you out there are really knowledgeable about these things. We've got a very diverse, intelligent group of listeners. Sometimes you guys point out our mistakes, but sometimes you guys have ideas for helping the podcast grow and build. And why not throw that out there? Some of you guys, like I said, some of you guys have great ideas. So maybe this discussion will generate some feedback that will help us move forward with some great ideas. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So Sean, it is time for you to take your leave, and we will discuss some spoilers for book people and even show-only people who don't mind being spoiled. Yeah. So first of all, we'll talk about the preview, which shows the first part of the preview for the next week's episode shows Ashaya and Ramsay, or Yara rather, and Ramsay going at it. And of course, since this plot line, as you book readers know, is not in the books at all, we really don't have any idea what to expect with this scene, other than I don't think it's going to result in the deaths of either Ramsay or Yara or Theon. Yeah. So
one thing we saw in the preview was a shirtless Ramsay Snow. Shame on you, Game of Thrones. We want more topless men, but not psychopaths. That's basically just, it's already hard enough for women to resist Ewan Rian. He's very hot. And to see him shirtless,
covered in
powerful,
blood.
looking powerful, covered in blood, he's really good as Ramsay Snow, so I can accept it. But there are so many girls that are going to find it so hard, and already do, not to like Ramsay. Like, I see it already. There are Bolton fans, not only for Ramsay, but for Roose, because Roose is much more good-looking, too. And, I wish they wouldn't cast psychopaths as very hot. But, we'll accept it.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what they do with that. To jump in with something that we talked about, that alluded to earlier in the episode that we would talk about because it relates to the Greyjoys. The casual mention of Dario capturing the Myronese fleet, I've got a bad feeling that is going to substitute for the entire Greyjoys going to Slaver's Bay plot. Not for sure, but I have this sinking suspicion.
I was very concerned, like I said, about the Sand Snakes. And I was equally concerned about the Greyjoys, that they would pare it down. They'd just be like one brother, like a Euron, Victarion, Aeron, like amalgam or whatever. But the fact that they've mentioned all 8 Sand Snakes actually, you know, has skewed me a little bit more in the other direction. If they can mention them and include them, we can get a Greyjoy brother, at least one. So
I have a cynical view of that because I feel like if they're going to do the Sand Snakes, it gives them even less time for the Greyjoys.
Yeah.
But the other possibility, though, that to consider is that, well, for one thing, another major change is that Balon still isn't dead. Balon's the first of the 3 kings
That's
to
why
die
all
in
the more
books.
reason that I feel like they're saving us. You know, they're waiting for that. Maybe we're just gonna see it happen this season.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. But I feel like they are. I'm just, like I said, I'm just a lot more hopeful that we will see the Greyjoys after, like I said, the Sand Snake thing. Even with the ship thing, I have never felt that they could just get rid of the Greyjoys altogether. I felt like they could just combine them into one person with a horn going there. And I don't know how it turns out, but I still feel like it's fairly important, and it looks like it's fairly important. And yeah, I think they'll have at least a Greyjoy, and I'm more hopeful now.
Okay.
And as much as you're less hopeful.
I am less hopeful.
Yeah.
I think those are good points, but it honestly doesn't really affect my opinion. I'm still pretty down on the whole possibility. Not that I don't want it to happen. Greyjoy chapters, I love them. I'm not one of those people that thinks they're a waste of time.
Because they want to give it more time. They want to wait till the Greyjoy stuff can come out and be more of a focus, and so they're holding off on that.
Which would indicate potentially, because they haven't cast any other possible Greyjoys this season, that does kind of push Balon's death more towards the end of the season.
Yeah, the end of the season, then the next season it starts off and like we see all these new characters, and that's kind of, I really hope that is the case. I feel like if Game of Thrones introduced all these new characters and like, some people hated it in the book, some people loved it, and I feel like a lot of people would be really invigorated and would be fascinated and be like, wow, the world's expanding. That's how I felt, and I like to think that show viewers would be like, whoa. But like Sean's mind would just explode. Like he's like has a list of characters, and he's like, there's like 40 characters, and I have to keep track of, you know, and he would just be even more in awe.
You know, I think I just figured it out. I think I just figured out how this is going to go. Asha Yara is going to successfully rescue Theon from the Dreadfort and going to be captured by Stannis' army as it comes into the north, which is where she is during Dance of Dragons. Mm-hmm. Both of them are in Stannis' clutches. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what's going to happen here. She's going to escape from the Dreadfort successfully, and then on her way back to the Iron Island, she's going to be captured by Stannis' invading army, just like she is when she's fleeing the Deepwood Motte in Dance of Dragons. So there's my prediction. Well, we'll see how that works out.
So yeah, we see the Iron Bank. We see Bravos. Can't wait to see more shots of that. You know,
that
longer
beautiful shot.
Yeah, I hope we get a little bit longer of a shot of the Titan of Bravos. Because yeah, that shot is being used a lot. I would like to see some other angles.
It looks like Stannis is at the Iron Bank.
He is.
Rather than what we thought happened, what we thought might happen was the Iron Bank coming to Dragonstone, but that seems to be Stannis going to Bravos.
Finally, we have some different lighting for Stannis. Not dark. He's got a little more natural light on him.
Yeah, maybe they're showing him more in a good light.
Dragonstone scenes are like infamously dark.
Yeah,
which is funny because it's a dark plot line, you know,
and a dark castle.
And a dark castle,
Dragonstone
you
is
know,
supposed to be.
It's supposed to be, but yeah, when it comes to TV, it's very bad. In some TV screens, it just looks muddy and horrible. Anyways, then we have, of course, we see Daenerys and Drogon.
Yeah, just a quick movement of Drogon, so we can expect some dragon action next episode. We also have a very interesting set of short scenes there with Varys and Oberyn having a conversation, and Oberyn says the line, "Everyone's interested in something," and I don't know what that's in reference to.
Littlefinger's interested in everything.
I'm guessing Varys does his whole, I don't have motivation, and Oberyn's like, I don't believe you, buddy. Everybody's after something. And they maybe they're starting to set up.
It might have something to do with the Tyrion stuff.
It may be setting up Varys' role becoming more clear, and his whole hidden plot line with Fagon and all these other background machinations that show that he's not really supporting Dany. He's using her as a pawn. But wait, she's got dragons, so that changes everythywing.
Yeah. And then we have Jaime and Tywin having a little conversation.
It seems that Jaime's trying to convince
trial shots.
Jaime's trying to convince Tywin that Tyrion's maybe not guilty, and Tywin, from the look of it, of course, it could just be clever editing. It seems like Tywin's made his mind up already that he agrees with Cersei that Tyrion's guilty, or perhaps he just wants to believe that Tyrion's guilty because it enables him to finally get rid of his embarrassing son, even though in the books Tywin has no intention of letting Tyrion be executed. He wants to send him to the wall. It's still, in any case, Tyrion would be removed from the picture and would be no longer an embarrassment. Only an embarrassment through memory.
I think that's it for the preview. I did have one thing I wanted to mention. If you haven't read any of the Winds of Winter spoiler chapters, please turn this off. It's a really minor spoiler, but I did want to just give it a mention. I think I said it enough. I think it's good. You probably turned off now if you don't want to listen, hopefully. Anyways, we see in the Arianne preview chapter, of course, she's with Elia Sand. And, that's how we learn that she's Lady Lance. And I think that this mention of her also, made me feel good about Elia perhaps being, more important later on, which I've thought since I saw her that she would have a pretty big part to play in that whole plot line with Arianne and Fagon. So it certainly was, it made sense because of Oberyn's sister that he would name drop her, but I also thought it was interesting that the one sand snake that I felt like would be really important that hasn't become important was the one mentioned by name.
That's a good point. One other thing that we kind of skipped over from the preview was that Dany is being, in her situation, her as Queen of Slavers Bay is being discussed at Small Council. So it seems that Daenerys' plot,
that's true.
her comings and goings and her doings, people are starting to pay attention to her in Westeros.
And Jorah knew that, I think he said Tommen Baratheon was crowned or something. I thought he said that.
He certainly knew that Joffrey was dead.
So is Jorah still exchanging messages there?
Yeah, how did he find this out? That's a good question.
That was kind of... Yeah.
Because we certainly have, at some point, Jorah's got to get outed as having been a spy. Barristan is not going to be the vehicle for that. He didn't know. Yeah. That's already been covered in last season. In fact, it was covered that Jorah is not going to get outed by Barristan because Barristan is simply ignorant of these things. So how he's going to get outed,
I'm not sure.
That's still an open question, but you're right. It's probably something to do with his knowledge of what's happening in King's Landing. Somehow that's going to come out that he knows things he shouldn't know or that he was a spy. Don't know how the show's going to handle that, but I'm sure they will. It doesn't seem like something they can just drop. So that's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we will be back next week. We might have another episode out, a bonus episode we're working on that's going to be not too long. We've got it pretty close to done. It might be out before the next episode, but I'm not going to promise anything because my promises to that regard, to that in effect in the bag. I'm bad at that. So I stopped promising when episodes would be out. We said it in a different
episode, and someone was like, what's the story behind that? I was like, the story behind it is that Aziz just has many times been like, episode out next week, and it's not out next week.
Yeah, I bite off more than I can chew sometimes. I have the right intentions, but I can't always live up to them because these things take time. We were slaves to our own perfectionism. We don't want to put out an episode until it's ready.
Yes. All right.
All right, folks. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks.